All right, let's talk about editing and revising your writing because we are getting to the point now where you have done your rough draft, you have gotten your feedback from myself, from other students, etc., etc., etc. And now you got to kind of put it all together. You got to take the advice you got and either use it or not use it and decide on your own or with your partner how you're going to make your writing better. And so let's talk about how you do that for any kind of writing. This is not just for my class in particular. This is for any class that has a big writing project in it. So more than just writing, more than just reading class. It could be science. It could be math. It could be history. Whatever it might be. Okay. So one of the things that I feel is a huge problem when it comes to editing and revising is that a lot of times students and sometimes teachers kind of mix up these two words here. And so I kind of want to go through each one of them. And let's start with revising. Revising is making mistakes on a kind of sentence by sentence level. And so that is your grammar, that is your spelling, that is making sure you're using the right adjectives, making sure everything is in past tense, present tense, like very small little details, okay? Revising is more of a structural level, paragraphs, in order, kind of revising a paper, an essay, whatever it might be. So that is ordering your paragraphs in a way that makes sense. That is taking out unfocused paragraphs or making them more focused, adding in more information, taking out information, things like that. So when we talk about editing and revising, the question I always ask kids is, well, which one do you do first? And a lot of kids say editing, and that is wrong. I would do revising first, and here is why. It makes no sense to edit something that you might be getting rid of or might be changing later on. It is kind of like a building, and editing is like rearranging the furniture and moving the furniture around and taking out some furniture and putting the furniture back in, stuff like that. Revising is like demolishing the building and starting again or adding on to it and stuff like that. And if you're going to add on to a pre-existing building, if you're going to, destroy a room, take off the floor, whatever it might be, it makes no sense to, rearrange the furniture first. It makes more sense to do the big thing first and then do all the little things, okay? So when we're going through this, make sure you're doing revising more first. Then at the end, kind of do your editing, spruce it up a little bit, make it sound a little bit better, and then you can be done with that draft. And I don't call it a final draft per se because, one, a writer is never done. And sometimes it's tough to kind of let go of a writing piece because it's never going to be perfect in your eyes. And so there's just got to be a point where it's like, okay, it's time to turn it in. Let's see how it goes. And that's kind of where you guys and girls get. And sometimes you don't take as much time on that as you should. And we'll talk about that here, okay? So when you're looking at your writing, you have to ask yourself two big questions. One, what did I want my piece of writing to do in the first place? Think about your goals again. Think about your audience. Think about where you were going to publish it. Think about all those kind of things. And then ask yourself, did my writing actually get there? And if it didn't, is that purposely done? A lot of you have been writing and writing and writing, and you're realizing this is a different piece than what I originally intended. Some of you bit off a bit more than you could chew. Some of you wanted to do a certain kind of publishing or product at the end, and it is completely something different now. And that's okay. As long as your kind of intent is there and your audience is still there, the platform part can change, and that's cool. Some of you have kind of not done anything, and that's why it's changing. That's not good, and we'll talk about that. Now, one of the things with a rough draft that I love to tell kids to do is to take a day off from looking at it. And this goes for any kind of essay that you're writing in any other class. Most of you have probably already done this enough in my class where, you don't have to do this again. Because, it's been a while. I'm guessing no one has worked on this over the weekend. I'm guessing no one has looked at this in a while. But just taking a day or two off of it and like hiding it so you can't see it is key. Because you have been so focused on it that you kind of can't see the mistakes. You can't see where it's wrong. You can't see what's bad about it and what needs to be fixed. And by taking a day or two off of it, you're refocused, you are recommitted to it, and you can kind of see it in a different light. It's still yours, and you still know what you're trying to say in it, but you're at least able to go like, oh, shoot, I said that? In it. And that's always tough to do if you're constantly looking at it and constantly, editing along the way kind of stuff. So, my advice is to take a day or two off. The writing that I shared with you, I did that. I took some days off. I took a lot of time off it, actually. And when I came back to it, I was like, oh my God, this is terrible. But then I knew it was terrible. And so I knew how I could fix it. I had ideas. And you guys and girls talked to me about it. And I was able to, add in some of those things. And now I'm able to revise it and make it better. Once you pull it back up, the first thing I want you to do is just to read it again. From start to finish, don't make any corrections. We are so, just in the habit of anytime we see a mistake, we stop and we fix it right then and there. And that's okay every now and then, but the hardest part about writing is to get everything down on paper. And the hardest part is to kind of, look at those mistakes and know that they're there, but keep reading and keep looking at your own piece. So make sure you are trying to do that, okay? You will fix it later on. It's okay. But again, why edit it here when you might be revising completely and that might not even be there in the final draft of it? All right, so your first round of revisions are the big ideas. Remember, we're talking about revising, and we're taking that big idea, okay? So this means to look at your writing as a whole. Now, a lot of kids, I feel like they are afraid, they are embarrassed, they are ashamed to take stuff out of their writing. It's okay. It is okay to take stuff out of your writing that doesn't work or isn't tied to your intent, to your audience, to your goals. Okay? We had a lot of writing in here where it takes some time. It takes some writing, some, garbage stuff to get to the good stuff. But don't keep that garbage in there. Okay? A lot of you have some good nuggets and some good details in there. You just kind of have to sift through it and pull out some of the garbage to get those nuggets and then add to it. So when you are starting to revise, there are 4 things to look for: unity, voice, purpose, and flow. We're going to go over each one of those. You don't have to, write them down right now, kind of a deal. So the first one is unity, and making sure your writing fits in one piece. And this is tough to do for a lot of reasons. The first one is this is an extended writing piece. And sometimes it's really hard to get into the same mindset each time that you write it. And there might be days where you come in here and you're like, oh my God, I do not want to write. I do not care. This is so stupid, blah, blah, blah. And you don't really put in the effort. And then the next day you come in and you go, oh my God, I have inspiration up the butt and I am going to get this done. It's going to be great. And so I'm guessing that your mood and your tone between day 1 and day 2 there are completely different. And again, going back to what I said before, you might start off not really knowing what you're writing about. And if it's a 10-page thing, if you get to page 4 and you're starting to understand oh, this is what I want to write about. And then you kind of go from there and you're off to the races. You still have pages 1 through 4 that you need to go back and make sure that it fits and it connects and it has the same kind of clarity and the same kind of energy to it that those last 6 pages have. So making sure everything kind of comes together, it sounds like it's all one coherent piece. And when I say mood and tone, make sure you understand what those two things are. Mood is the mood in the piece and how it's supposed to sound. If it's supposed to be funny, if it's supposed to be scary, if it's supposed to be dark, if it's supposed to be light, whatever it might be. And then tone is kind of your attitude from it. And so they're a little bit different, but just kind of make sure everything just sounds like it comes from the same piece. If you have a lot of detail in one paragraph and you have no detail in the next paragraph, that kind of tells me that it's not unified because it should be pretty consistent through each of its paragraphs. So make sure you do that, okay? The next one is voice, and this one is very similar to Unity because, and this goes especially for anything that you're doing a character for. And when I say a character, if you're doing a podcast, a blog, whatever it might be, you're a character in that. You are presenting yourself to your audience. And if it's video wise, if it's audio wise, you might be a little awkward at first and then kind of find your rhythm. And so getting some of those practice podcasts out of the way or those practice videos out of the way definitely helps. With your voice, it might take you a while to figure out, okay, this is how I want my character to sound. This is how I want to sound on this video. I want to sound like I know what I'm talking about and be really professional. Well, maybe at the beginning, you thought you wanted to sound like a funny little jokey person. And so now you have to kind of fix that and make it all consistent from the beginning to the end of your writing and making sure it stays the same. Next one is purpose. When you are revising, make sure that you have all the information you need and everything ties back to your purpose. We have talked a lot about this when it comes to this class, and we talked about just this idea that, just because you wrote it doesn't mean you have to keep it in there. So don't do that, okay? If it's garbage and it doesn't meet the need of what you're trying to do, get rid of it. I would rather have 4 pages that are very concrete and they're purpose-driven than 8 pages that might be written well, but it doesn't match up to what you're supposed to be doing. I got kids in English 11 right now redoing essays because although they wrote it well, it didn't match the essay question. And that's a problem if that's what you're supposed to be doing. So, again, if it doesn't match up, get rid of it or consider getting rid of it or consider editing, changing it, making it better so it does fit. And that's key, okay? Next one is flow. Flow is the way that your writing reads. So with this one, I think some key ways to look at this and to figure out if it flows well is to read it out loud. Not in class, don't do, well, I mean, if everyone's doing it, I guess you could probably do that. But read it out loud. If there's any parts that you are stumbling over or that you are like stopping because you don't really know what's going on, then that might be a spot to kind of look at and go, does that flow? Especially if you're a good reader. If you're not a good reader, it still might be a flow issue and you might want someone else to read it and maybe have someone read it to you and then you can hear it that way as well. Another way to kind of check for flow is to kind of read it backwards, sentence by sentence. So that way you can hear on a sentence level and make sure that sentence sounds like it's supposed to sound the way that it is, okay? So reading it front to back or up to down is kind of looking at it as a whole. Reading it back to, back or the end to the beginning, sentence by sentence, kind of lets you listen to it on a smaller level. And that's key to make sure that it all sounds like it goes together and it sounds natural, especially if you're doing a script. If you're doing a script and it doesn't flow, it's not going to work that well, especially if you're kind of focused on reading what's on the script, which you should be for the most part. So just know that, okay? Another thing I want to talk about is talking down to the readers and showing versus telling. And we all remember show and tell in school. We know the better thing to do is to show something versus telling it. And a lot of you got into, especially if you were writing stuff, you were into a telling mode. where you weren't given any details, you were just kind of summarizing. And so make sure you show us and let us interpret, let us infer stuff. Instead of just telling us directly what's going on, infer it to us, so that way we have to make an educated guess and we go, oh, based on what you just said, this is what I think is happening. Okay? You want to make it clear, but not so clear, because you don't want your reader to feel dumb. Readers want to be treated with respect, and if you don't treat them with respect, then you're not going to keep them. I think my favorite example of this is in Harry Potter, in the first Harry Potter, when they think Snape is the person who is bewitching Harry's broomstick. And Hermione runs to light his cloak on fire. And on the way, it just says something very briefly like, she was in such a hurry, she didn't even apologize for running into Professor Quirrell. And it's just that little line that then, makes you, later on, when you find out that Quirrell's the bad guy, you go, oh, that's how that happened, because Hermione ran into him. And it's just this little thing that, lets us kind of solve that mystery that, it's not told to us directly. And it's just kind of a moment in a line that you don't think has that much importance, but it does later on. And so if you just kind of have that idea in mind, I don't want to trick my reader, but I don't want to give them, I want them to be able to connect some dots, especially in some of those readings, then you want to do that. If you're doing more like a podcast or you don't want to dumb it down so much or talk so slow that is just going to annoy them and make them turn off your video, your podcast, whatever it might be. All right, so second round of revisions. So we're getting out to the editing part here, which is the smaller ideas. So now we're looking at individual scenes, individual paragraphs, individual sentences. And there are 3 things to work on. I'm not going to cover repetition and rhythm a whole lot. Rhythm is very similar to flow. Does it just sound like it comes off the tongue naturally? Those kind of things. Repetition, don't repeat yourself. Especially if it's like in the same paragraph. If you kind of say the same thing, not exactly in the same way, that's still repetition. Okay? Don't do that. That's stupid. If you tell us once and move on. Okay? I don't care about your word count. I don't care how long a paragraph is. Okay? And I think that's one of the reasons why people repeat stuff just in a different way, is they want to get that word count up. They want to get that page count up. I don't care about that. Okay? So don't do it. Well, let's talk about specifics though. Make sure your nouns and your adjectives are accurate and specific. Make sure if you're saying he, I know who he is. She, I know who she is. It, I know what it is. They, them, those kind of nouns and pronouns, make sure that they match up. If you're using adjectives, which describe nouns, make sure that those adjectives are specific to that one thing. No one likes a really vague adjective that doesn't tell me exactly what's going on there, okay? Add sentences, okay? Again, I don't care about word count, and neither should you. So, add another sentence, add another 2 sentences, add in some more description, add in more details. Make sure we know what's going on there, okay? And then, this is even more editing stuff. Again, make sure your nouns and pronouns are correctly done. Make sure that you're using correct adjectives. Make sure that if you have dialogue, it serves a purpose. And that goes for quotes too. If you have a quote in your thing, make sure it serves a purpose. Make sure your sentences aren't to the wordy part where it is almost basically a run-on sentence, but also don't make sure that your sentences are too basic, because that makes it sound like that you think the reader is dumb, and you don't want to make the reader sound dumb. And so you need a mixture of simple sentences, but also compound, complex sentences as well. And then at the very, very end of this, look for your typos, look for your grammar. Don't trust the little squiggly line thing, because it might be the right word in there, but it might be, or it might be spelled correctly, but it might be the wrong word for the thing. Okay? All right, so that's all I have for revisions and editing. So this is what we're doing kind of the next week and a half, until we get to that last week before winter break. And then we'll talk about what's going on then, okay? If you have any questions over this, let me know. I'd be more than happy to help you out, and we can talk. But go to your rough draft, get working on it. All right.